For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. Welcome to the Antiquities Travel Guide, a helping hand for visiting historic places. Follow us to different countries as we search for ancient artifacts. If you too wish to explore the ancient past through travel, we'll help you plan where to go, what to see, and how best to enjoy what you encounter. In this series of the ATG, you can accompany Natalie and me on our trek through Egypt, homeland of the ancient Egyptians, Cushites, Libyans, Asiatics, and Greeks. Come on, let's go. Our third day staying in Giza, we gave Noah, our cameraman, the day off, and Natalie and I joined Ehab, our local guide, for a day examining ancient artifacts at some of the best museums in Cairo. Keep in mind that when we were there, the much-anticipated Grand Museum was not yet open, so we won't be showing you around there today. Instead, we will be visiting the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, the Coptic Museum, and the granddaddy of them all, the Egyptian Museum. All three of these have amazing treasures from the ancient world that you don't want to miss. We took a tuk-tuk over to our favorite juice shop to get a morning pick-me-up. Then we grabbed an Uber, and it was off to the NMEC. If you are ever in Cairo, this should be one of your top picks for museums. Everything today was shot on iPhone.
We're here at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. It's brand new. It just opened up in 2021. It costs $240 Egyptian pounds to get in, which I think is $9.50 US. It's such an incredible spot that everybody has to visit. There are exhibitions throughout history of Egypt. We're going to look at the ancient civilization section. So come with me and let's take a look.
Visiting the NMEC is a great way to learn about ancient Egyptian history and culture. The museum is modern and well designed. The main hall exhibits artifacts ranging in date from prehistoric times all the way up to the present. You can see everything up close. These implements and ware are from prehistoric times in Egypt, giving us an idea of the technology of the people living in the country in the years leading up to the dynastic period. Here is a stela of King Ka, the last ruler of the first dynasty. It simply has his name on it. This representation of a king's name is called a serak. It was commonly used in the early days before the cartouche became standard. The rectangle represents the king's palace, the name is within it, and the god Horus sits atop. This is the Horus name of the king. These works of art help historians a great deal in understanding the daily life of Egyptians. We don't always have documentation to let us know. This is why artistic depictions such as these fill in many of the gaps in our knowledge. How many stories did Egyptian buildings have? Archaeology can sometimes figure out if there was a second story, based on bottoms of staircases or ladder holes, but there is no way of telling if there was a third story, except with representations like these. The tall one is a model of an apartment building from the Greco-Roman period in Egypt's history. It was given as an offering in a temple, perhaps to petition the gods for protection of the building. The waves in the walls was a deliberate design to help the building hold up during earthquakes. These are models of soul houses, put in tombs of the Middle Kingdom as a place for the spirit of the deceased to reside. The style gives us clues about architecture of the period. Wooden cramps used to fasten stone together. In the New Kingdom, they are often inscribed with a king's name. Dowels made in stone were also used. Those who like ancient math, engineering, and construction will love these. Set squares and plumb bobs. The Egyptians were among the first to use them. These are parts of Egyptian measuring rods. This is how we know what units of measurement they used. Unfortunately, they were not completely standardized, so there is some slight variation. The Egyptian royal cubit ranged between 52.2 and 52.9 centimeters in length. The divisions of the cubit were named after the Egyptian nomes, that is, provinces. Scribal tools, and a representation of the scribal god Thoth as an ibis. The story of Senuhe, one of the great literary works of the Middle Kingdom on papyrus. It is rare to find one so well preserved. If you're wondering what kind of writing this is, it's hieratic, a cursive form of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Models of Egyptian riverboats. Again, art is providing what we are hard-pressed to find archaeologically. Check this out. The Egyptians used to make tents out of mats, which they used as little pavilions in their gardens or when they were out on hunting trips. Or they put them in front of their tombs as a place to perform purification rites. This one was found at the cemetery of Deir el-Bahari and comes from the 21st dynasty. This Sphinx, depicting Amenemhat III of the Middle Kingdom, comes from his funerary complex at Hawara. We will be going there in an upcoming episode. Notice the head is both human and lion. Here's a Sphinx from the Ptolemaic period with a fully human head. Look at this, an actual Egyptian chariot carriage from the New Kingdom, with intricate war art on it, and statuettes of war captives. I was particularly excited about this. An Egyptian shadow clock, which I examine in my book Shadow on the Steps. This is the first time I actually got to see it in person. Down here is the main attraction of the NMEC, the Royal Mummies Hall. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a display of the mummies of the actual kings and queens of Egypt. There is nowhere else you can see this. Unfortunately, no video or photos are permitted, so I couldn't film anything inside for you. You'll have to settle for some stills taken by others. There are 20 royal mummies in the hall, 18 kings and 2 queens, from the 17th until the 20th dynasty. You get to enter the presence of the actual rulers of Egypt. These mummies were taken from 2 royal mummy caches, one found at Deir el-Bahari and the other from the Valley of the Kings. Wait, what is a royal mummy cache? It's a place where Egyptian priests sheltered royal mummies. This was in the late period of Egypt, when royal tombs were being robbed. To protect the spirits of the kings and queens, priests retrieved the bodies and provided them protection. In much the same way, the museum here shelters the bodies of the royal dead. There is a new textile gallery here as well, which opened in 2022. The gallery exhibits the history of the development of Egyptian fabrics through the ages.
From here, like around this area, it's a little bit darker, but otherwise all it's you can see.
We then made our way to the Christian section of Cairo in order to visit the Coptic Museum. This part of town has a secure perimeter to ensure the safety of the residents and visitors, so you need to go through security to get in. It was time for lunch, so we randomly stopped at a place on the street to get something to eat. The prices were reasonable and the food was tasty. One of Egypt's most popular dishes is a street food called koshari, so we ordered some. It consists of pasta, fried rice, and lentils, and is topped with chickpeas, onions, and tomato sauce. Ehab said that the version they make here is not the traditional kind, and he knows some places on the street where we can get some authentic koshari.
So we're here at the Coptic Museum. It was £100 to get in, which is $4 US. It's such an incredible place, very beautiful inside, and artifacts of Coptic history and religious iconography, and it even actually has the apparently oldest copy of the Book of Psalms.
The museum is located within the walls of the Fortress of Babylon, as it has been dubbed, part of the old city walls built by the Emperor Trajan in 98 CE. You can see part of it here. The museum includes gardens and many buildings. These are the grounds of some early churches, that of St. Sergius and St. Barbara of the 4th century, and the so-called Hanging Church of the 6th century. The word Copt comes from Hakapta, the name of Memphis, but which was adopted as a word for the whole country. So Coptic means Egyptian. Coptic Christians are simply Egyptian Christians. The museum chronicles Christian history in Egypt, especially in Greco-Roman and early Islamic times. Over the years, the Coptic community has actively donated many precious and rare pieces, including icons, cloth, manuscripts, priestly garments, frescoes, and wooden panels. The museum now holds some 16,000 works of art, of which about 1,200 can be seen by the public. One of the things you will notice in the early imagery is the depiction of pagan gods. This might be surprising to some. Many of the first Christian images in Egypt were influenced by pagan models, but this is not because the Christians worshipped the pagan gods. What they were trying to do is to make new Christian images palatable and understandable to their contemporaries. The sculptures we see of the 4th and 5th centuries show subjects borrowed from Greco-Roman mythology, but they are endowed with Christian symbolism.
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite is shown emerging from the waters on a seashell, but the implicit reference is to a person's rebirth through baptism. The crux ansata, a Christian adaptation of the Ankh, was used in both Christian and pagan contexts, sometimes in combination with the Latin cross. The Copts were well known for their skills at weaving, and you can find many textiles of theirs here, which display a wide variety of techniques and materials. This tapestry probably was used as a curtain and is decorated with a dark-skinned piper and figures of dancers in Greek style. There are many beautiful works of art from the monastery of St. Jeremiah in Saqqara. Wait, there was a Christian monastery at Saqqara? Yes, there was. There are works from the monastery of St. Apollo at Bawit. I received a few comments on past episodes of this series expressing concern that we sometimes touch artifacts that we see on archaeological sites or in museums. These concerns are valid. Natalie and I, who both are historians and are interested in preserving ancient materials for as long as possible, refrain from touching fragile works, such as tapestries, paintings, and other delicate pieces of art, unless we are wearing gloves. Apart from simply damaging it in an obvious way, dirt and oils from your skin can get onto the surface, and these can attract more dirt. Acidic oils can also degrade metal. Regarding stone artifacts, these are less liable to damage. And at the archaeological sites, the guardians often let the public touch the stones. Granite or basalt will require cleaning from time to time, as the grime adds up, but they are unlikely to wear away, unless thousands of people over hundreds of years continue to touch it. Nevertheless, I probably should be setting a good example so that people watching the videos don't get the wrong idea, so I will bear that in mind for the future. Think of that when you later see me touching a sarcophagus. The museum owns some 6,000 papyrus manuscripts, including the Book of Psalms, which unfortunately was not on display at the time we visited, as well as manuscripts of Nag Hammadi, like this one. This one shows part of the Apocryphon of John, a Gnostic text from the Nag Hammadi library. This collection, which included 13 books, was found in 1945 and includes books that were important to the Gnostics, who were part of another branch of Christianity that arose in Egypt and has since died out. We saved the best museum for last. Anyone who's interested in ancient Egyptian history cannot miss the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.
So we're here at the Cairo Museum. It's in the middle of Cairo. It's massive. It has so many different exhibitions. You could really take 2 or 3 days just to see everything, so I would definitely recommend taking your time, but it's definitely a must-see when you come here. It is 200 Egyptian pounds to get in, which is $8 US.
Yes. My greatest miscalculation on this day was to leave it for last because it didn't give us enough time to see everything there. If you want to come here and not regret it later as I did, then you should reserve the whole day for the Egyptian Museum, and maybe 2 days, because it will astound you from opening until closing. The Narmer Palette, one of the most important historical documents from ancient Egypt. It comes from the beginning of the First Dynasty. You might wonder how this can count as a historical document, since there is barely any writing on it. The only actual writing is of names, written in hieroglyphs in front of some of the characters' faces. But what they are doing is telling a story, in order. It's like an ancient graphic novella. It is the story of how Narmer, king of Upper Egypt, brought Lower Egypt into subjection, or at least part of it. Egyptologists generally think this is recounting the tale of the initial unification of Upper and Lower Egypt by Narmer. The Black Pyramidion of Amenemhet III comes from the 12th dynasty, and it is believed to have topped the Black Pyramid of Dashur, which was constructed by that king. It's made of basalt and is cool because it is rare to find an intact pyramidion from a royal pyramid. The inscription along the bottom reads, "Opened is the face of King Amenemhet. He observes the Lord of the horizon crossing the sky. Higher is the Ba, the soul of King Amenemhet, than the height of Orion, and it joins the Duat, the underworld root of the sun." You can see so many sarcophagi from different periods here on the main floor.
And it's not perfectly cut.
Ehab, does it have dates for these? I don't see any cards or descriptions.
Sitting in like a throne. And here also the
The anthropoid ones from later times are my favorite.
It's a beautiful. Oh, these are just awesome.
So would they slaughter the goat on this?
That's why you see Gora holy water, the Gora holy water in it.
The reconstructed colossal limestone statue of Amenhotep III and his wife, Tia, dominates the floor. Take a look at this granite sarcophagus, unfinished, from the Old Kingdom. It's actually from the 4th dynasty, and it was being made for King Khufu's son Horjedef. Everyone loves to point out this unfinished saw cut, but what you probably didn't notice is that not only was there a saw cut coming down this side, there was a saw cut coming up from this side. That means this whole sarcophagus would have been tipped over, and they would have been sawing
from either end to save time. You have two teams of workers sawing on either end. Now, the other interesting thing is that the opening of the sarcophagus is on the other side, right? So they're taking the lid off the bottom of the sarcophagus, and then they were going to use it to place it onto the top of the sarcophagus. Now, one other thing. Some people say that, oh, look, it went off the line. See how here's their marking line where they were supposed to be sawing? Look, the saw went off the line, so that must mean they were using a power saw, because, if they were going slow, they would have noticed the mistake and stopped long before. But the fact is, when you're sawing something like this, you always think maybe we can get back on the line, maybe we can get back on track, and you keep going until you think you know that you can't do it anymore. But probably this thing was finished when they broke off half the lid, and then they realized, okay, well, we can't use it now.
Here is a family portrait of a nobleman and esteemed high priest named Seneb, a dwarf who worked for the mortuary temples of Khufu and Jedefra. It was typical to portray children as having a side lock and an index finger in the mouth. The wooden statues here are amazing. It is a wonder that they have survived, but they show that the style of Egyptian sculpture was similar across various mediums. This one is particularly outstanding. It's a life-sized statue, the oldest ever found in Egypt, of a lector priest named Ka'aper. This comes from the man's tomb at Saqqara. It's very realistic. His eyes are inlaid with quartz, rock crystal, and resin. Absolutely exquisite. The staff is a modern replacement.
That's Ptah.
Beta.
And Sender's at the first.
Yeah.
The God loves me.
Yep. If you don't want to make a big tomb, they can make a bit.
Look at the smooth polish.
This limestone panel was found in the ruins of the royal tomb at ancient Akhetaten, Tel El Amarna today. We will be going into the tomb in an upcoming episode. The panel depicts Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters worshipping the sun god Aten. Two altars holding offerings containing, among other things, bouquets of lotus flowers, are in front of the king and queen. They hold flowers in their hands. There are red grid lines drawn on the panel, which is an indication that Bach, the royal artist of the period, used the panel as a model or guide for artists working in the tomb. The Queen Nefertiti is represented here in brown quartzite. She looks proud and powerful. This head was intended to be part of a composite statue, with the various parts being held together by tenons. It is likely the work of Thutmose, the chief royal artist in Akhenaten's later years. The head was never finished, and this provides clues for how the work was done. You can see a line drawn down the center of the face to help the sculptor keep the symmetry. Facial features were first drawn in black and then corrected in red. These heads, also made of brown quartzite, are representations of Akhenaten's and Nefertiti's daughters. They too are likely the work of Thutmose and were intended to be part of composite statues. The art of Thutmose retains the elongated head and facial features typical of the earlier Amarna art style, but with greater elegance. You can see this in the neck, chin, and long pierced ears. The eyes and eyebrows are only painted in and have not yet received inlays of precious stone, so they were never completed. I realize whenever the Ancient Aliens crowd sees elongated heads, they immediately think it is evidence of extraterrestrial life forms. But considering that it was popular in Amarna art to depict people with elongated heads, most scholars think it is not intended to be realistic. I suppose it's possible that the practice of head binding children could have been temporarily in vogue at the time, but we have seen no physical evidence of this as far as I'm aware. If this type of head does somehow represent reality, my personal supposition is that perhaps this was actual headwear worn at the time, deliberately made to mimic the appearance of an elongated head, in much the same way as Akhenaten's and Nefertiti's headwear. Another important historical document is the Merenptah stela, erected by the king Merenptah of the 19th dynasty. In it he boasts about his conquests in the land of Canaan, and among the stela's contents is the earliest ever mention of a people called Israel. He says he completely wiped them out, which is clearly an exaggeration. Our day came to an end far too quickly. If you are ever in Cairo, all 3 of these museums covered today are worth visiting, and especially the last one. But the Grand Museum, which has been in preparation for some time, is due to open soon, and that may turn out to be the greatest of them all. In our next episode, we will be visiting a site that you can only get into with special permission, and that is the site of Abu Sir, containing the remains of some amazing pyramids and temples from the Old Kingdom. Be sure not to miss it by clicking subscribe and turning on notifications.